Record-breaking NFL superstar, a former #1 draft pick, losing a $120 million contract over dogfight.
The first day I walked into prison and they slammed that door, I knew, the magnitude of the decisions that I made.
In Surry County, Virginia, there is a 16-acre estate located on Moonlight Road. The house is humble by professional athlete standards, a white farmhouse-style home with a classic white fence around the perimeter. Driving by the estate, it looked harmless. However, it wasn't what was happening inside the house that would lead to the downfall of one of the NFL's top quarterbacks, but what was happening just under the tree line several yards behind the home. Off of a narrow gravel drive, there were 3 black sheds, camouflaged by the trees and very secluded at night, especially on a fight night, when dozens of cars would fill the lot, $20 per head admission charged for the spectacle. However, the fights were not of men strapping on boxing gloves, but of several rounds of dogfights. One of the 3 sheds was climate controlled with a ring on the floor and pens on the first floor, and became one of the most popular dogfighting locations in the state of Virginia, especially during the NFL offseason. This dogfighting operation was named Bad News Kennels. In the years that the operation existed, there was as many as 60 to 70 dogs housed at one time in the sheds behind that White House in Smithville, Virginia. This successful illegal business would last for almost 6 years, when in 2007, police raided the Bad News Kennel, which meant bad news for NFL quarterback Michael Vick. What's going on, guys? Mike here, back again with another video. Before we get to the content, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to support this Dark Stories of the NFL series. Every like tells the YouTube algorithm you like my channel, and you like NFL content, and you like dark stories being delivered straight to your recommended feed. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. Michael Vick grew up in Newport News, Virginia, in the projects but in a stable home for the area, with his mother, father, grandmother, and 3 other siblings all often under the same roof. His father would sometimes be gone for stints as he struggled with drug abuse. Thus, Vick's mentor became his grandmother. At 7 years old, while watching the Washington football team with his grandmother, Michael Vick declared that he wanted to be a professional football player. At the age of 9, he threw his first football as quarterback for the local Boys and Girls Club, with that toss also becoming his first touchdown. In grade school is also where Michael Vick would see the sport of dogfighting take place on the streets of Newport News. He didn't focus that much on that illegal sport as a youth, as he was much more interested in spending time on the football field. Although he only stood 6 feet tall, in 3 years as a starter for Ferguson High School, he passed for 4,846 yards with 43 touchdowns and rushed for over 1,000 yards while scoring 18 touchdowns via his quick feet. Vick was recruited heavily by Syracuse University and also Virginia Tech. Ultimately, he decided to stay close to home, choosing to become the next quarterback for the Hokies. Vick was headed to college, and some of his friends from Newport News would follow him to Blacksburg, including one of his closest, Quainus Phillips. In the first half of his redshirt freshman year, Vick rushed for 3 touchdowns, yet an ankle sprain just before halftime kept him out of the remainder of the game. After just missing 1 game, he quickly returned to lead Virginia Tech to an undefeated season, eventually facing off against Florida State in the national championship, where they lost, but Vick held the nation's attention by leading an impressive comeback attempt rally. Vick won an ESPY as the National Top Collegiate Player and the inaugural Archie Griffin Award as college football's MVP. In just his first year of collegiate play, he finished third in the 1999 Heisman Trophy voting, and in Vick's sophomore season, he would be just as successful, but he was plagued with an injury that kept him out of a few games. He did return for the Gator Bowl matchup against Clemson, in which he was named the MVP. His sophomore season would be his last as a Hokie, as his next stop would be the NFL, and he definitely was poised for the first round, as one of his unofficial combine 40 times was clocked as the fastest ever for a quarterback. Now, the San Diego Chargers held the number 1 overall pick in the 2001 NFL Draft and were in need of a quarterback. Thus, they had initially shown interest in Michael Vick, but rumors circulated that they were turned off by the entourage that Vick had accompany him to workouts. And the day before the draft, the San Diego Chargers traded their number 1 overall pick selection to the Atlanta Falcons for the Falcons' first and third round pick the following year. Thus, on April 21st, 2001, Michael Vick became the first black quarterback to go number 1 overall when he was selected by the Atlanta Falcons. Michael Vick was destined to be a force to be reckoned with on NFL fields for a significant time to come. That is, if he could stay healthy and, more importantly, stay out of trouble. A 6-year, $62 million contract was signed by Vick, and he immediately made several real estate and car purchases, including a country estate on Moonlight Road in Surry County, Virginia. In his first year as a Falcon, Vick only started 2 games, but in 2002, his second year in Atlanta, Vick would start 15 games, putting up a Pro Bowl-worthy season and only missing 1 start due to a shoulder injury. Vick went through that season with an impressive streak of 177 passes without an interception. The Falcons were in the playoffs, where Vick led his team to a shocking win over the Packers, who were heavily favored, but took a loss in the second round to the Philadelphia Eagles and Donovan McNabb. The next season, Vick broke his leg during a meaningless preseason game and didn't return until the final 3 games of the season, which were all wins, but not enough for a playoff appearance. 2004 was perhaps Vick's most successful season, setting a postseason record for a QB by rushing for 119 yards in the first round of the playoffs, and he would lead the Falcons all the way to the NFC Championship, where they would lose to the pesky Eagles. Vick had returned to fine form on the field that season, passing for 2,313 yards with 14 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He added 902 yards of rushing and 3 touchdowns on foot, as the Falcons finished so close to a Super Bowl appearance. However, earlier in 2004, Vick had a brush with the law in which 2 men driving a truck that was registered to him were arrested for distributing marijuana back in Virginia. Vick was not charged, but only verbally reprimanded by the Falcons. In October of 2004, Vick was at the Atlanta airport with his entourage when Quainus Phillips was caught by security cameras picking up a luxury watch that belonged to an airport security worker. The watch was returned 6 days later, and Vick was not involved in the investigation. During the 2005 and 2006 season, Vick put up solid numbers once again, passing for over 2,000 yards, and in 2006, he became the first quarterback to rush for over 1,000 yards in the season. In 2006, Michael Vick's future looked so bright as he just signed a huge contract extension, and his number 7 jersey was the top-selling jersey of the year. However, unknown to his coaches, teammates, and Falcons fans, during the offseason, Vick focused on another sport that he loved: dogfighting. He had kept this secret operation under wraps for 6 years. Then, on April 25th, 2007, just before NFL minicamps were set to begin, dozens of police cars sped down Moonlight Road, arriving at the White House in search of a drug ring. However, what they stumbled upon was a different kind of ring, a dogfighting ring in which drug and gambling activity was also taking place. Police entered the back of the property to hear dozens of dogs barking. In the investigation that quickly followed, authorities uncovered that this property, owned by Michael Vick, was where extreme abuse of dogs had taken place for years. It was appalling circumstances for what is most affectionately known as man's best friend. At Bad News Kennel, 66 dogs were removed, and the bodies of 8 more who were executed the night before were exhumed. Also removed was a plethora of dog fighting accessories and the pit used for fighting. While on the golf course, Vick's phone rang informing him that Bad News Kennels had been raided by the police. In the days that followed, Michael Vick vehemently denied his involvement in the operation, sending a statement that he had never even been to the house on Moonlight Road. He went on to tell his coaches at the Falcons and even the NFL commissioner that he didn't have anything to do with the dogfighting ring and never spent time at the estate. However, the news hit the public quickly. PETA immediately called for Vick's suspensions, and Vick quickly lost major endorsements. It would come to light a few months later that those statements that Michael Vick made were indeed a lie, and Vick would soon have some very rough days ahead of him. On July 17, 2007, a Richmond, Virginia federal grand jury charged Michael Vick and 3 co-conspirators with 3 felonies: dogfighting, procurement, and training of pit bulls for fighting, and engaging in dogfighting activities across state lines. On July 26th, Vick and 3 other men pleaded not guilty, with boos and cheers following him as he walked out of the courthouse. However, those 3 co-conspirators, Pernell Peace, Quainus Phillips, and Tony Taylor, each of whom had prior criminal records, bargained a plea deal for themselves in exchange for testifying against Michael Vick. On August 27, 2007, Michael Vick pleaded not guilty in front of a federal judge. The NFL suspended Vick indefinitely, and the Atlanta Falcons sued Vick for $20 million, saying that he had breached his contract. In November, Vick surrendered early, partly due to a failed drug test 2 months prior. Saying goodbye to his girlfriend and 2 daughters, Vick was expected to be sentenced to 12 to 18 months in prison. One of his last visits before trading his jersey in for a jumpsuit was to his grandmother, the person who had introduced young Vick to the sport of football, something he had continuously succeeded in until now. His grandmother was in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, and Vick, becoming overcome with emotion, was unable to confess to her, telling her he was on his way to training camp, not to a prison cell. Immediately after turning himself into the Richmond, Virginia station, he was taken to a regional jail in Virginia to await his sentence for the next 3 weeks. While waiting in jail, Vick was also ordered to pay $1 million to assist with the care, rehabilitation, and even some euthanasia of the dogs that were removed from Bad News Kennels. On December 10, 2007, standing before the judge, Michael Vick was sentenced to 23 months in prison, all while the judge austerely criticized Vick for his actions, his insincere apologies, and his lies. Vick was taken across the country to the Hot House, a federal prison located on Highway 73 in the middle of the pastures of Leavenworth, Kansas. Vick traded a pigskin in for a floor mop, as his job was that of a night custodian that got paid 12 cents an hour. On Sunday, however, Vick and other inmates were able to watch the NFL, where Vick shared his knowledge with fellow prisoners, keeping his mind sharp and his goal of returning to the NFL on the forefront of his attention. Then, 6 months into his sentence on April 28, 2008, Michael Vick had an especially bad day. It was his mother's birthday, and later in the day, his grandmother had a stroke, leaving her incapacitated. To pour salt in the wound, that evening was the 2008 NFL Draft, where the Atlanta Falcons would draft Matt Ryan, their quarterback of the future, number 3 overall in the NFL Draft, leaving Michael Vick all but forgotten. In the summer of 2008, Vick filed for bankruptcy, but a judge denied, and Vick started to clean up his act, vowing to repay his debts. He needed a mentor too, and Tony Dungy, former Indianapolis Colts coach and man of God, helped Vick grow in faith, and Vick set out on a mission to earn the public's forgiveness and return to football. While Vick served his time behind bars, the victims, the dogs, faced a grueling journey to recovery. PETA and the Humane Society thought that the dogs may never live a normal life. However, shortly after the raid, the U.S. District brought in the ASPCA to evaluate the dogs via pit bull specialists. 47 were deemed to be able to be rehabilitated. The dogs were split up and taken in by 8 rescue organizations throughout the US, with 25 quickly taken to foster homes and eventually adopted. The remaining 22 were taken to a rescue organization in Utah for more rehabilitation, hoping that they would soon become adoptable and live a life that a pet is meant to live. Dr. Steven Zawitowski, a psychologist and ASPCA animal behavior specialist who worked extensively with the Vick dogs, told NPR,
We were uncertain. Every dogfighting case, every case like this with dogs is different. Sometimes you find the dogs in better shape than in others. We thought maybe if we found a handful of dogs, it would be a precedent. The target might have been 5 or 10 dogs out of this particular group. So that's what we were thinking we might get, and if we got that, we'd be pretty happy. And then the next step was going in and looking at each of those dogs as individuals.
After 18 months, Vick was released from prison. There was no first-class flight home, but an 18-hour drive back to Virginia to commence a 2-month home sentence where he was only allowed to report to a construction job and a position at the local Boys and Girls Club. After his house arrest, he pleaded for the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to give him another chance. Roger agreed and he was reinstated in the NFL, and since he had been released by the Falcons, he was officially a free agent. There was another man willing to give Michael Vick a second chance, and this man was known to be aware of great talent and possess a patient father figure mentality, and that was Philadelphia Eagles head coach Andy Reid, who wanted to sign Michael Vick and was willing to give him a second chance. Reid said of Vick in a press conference that a person should not pay for his sins forever. In August 2009, the Eagles signed Vick, and controversy soon followed with protesters showing up at the introductory press conference. Signs were held up high, one specifically with words reading, "Hide your beagle, Vick is an Eagle." Vick needed to get back into playing shape in order to make a positive impact on the field. The plan was that 29-year-old Vick would be a third-string Wildcat formation quarterback, used for his running ability. He was inactive until Week 3 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Exactly 1,001 days since he had played in an NFL game, Vick stepped onto the field again. It was the middle of the first quarter, and on the first down, Vick ran for 7 yards, but that was enough for him to feel like his return would be successful. For the next season, the Eagles picked up his 2010 option, with trade rumors spreading. Shockingly, the Eagles traded starting quarterback Donovan McNabb to Washington, moved Kevin Kolb to number 1, and Michael Vick to number 2. Trouble nearly got Michael Vick again on his 30th birthday. During his party held at a Virginia club, his old friend Quainus Phillips attended, uninvited, and a verbal interaction ensued, mostly because Phillips and Vick, due to probation, were not allowed at the same functions. Vick and his family immediately left. Just minutes later, Phillips was shot in the leg outside the club. He did survive, and thanks to Vick's early departure, the police cleared him of any connection to the attempted murder. In the 2010 season opener for the Eagles, starting quarterback Kevin Kolb did not return after the first half due to a concussion, and Vick would start the second half under center. In that second half, Vick rushed for over 100 yards and passed for 175 yards and a touchdown. The 30-year-old Vick seemed to be a solid quarterback once again. In the next game, Vick had 3 touchdowns, and then in the following game, 4 touchdowns, and was named NFC Player of the Month for September, with fortune teller Reid stuck with Vick for the remainder of the season. A season in which the Eagles qualified for the playoffs in an amazing miracle game, where the Eagles scored 28 unanswered points against the Giants in the Meadowlands to lead them into the playoffs. However, Vick threw an interception in the end zone against the Packers' first-round playoff game, with the Eagles taking the loss. Vick was named the Associated Press's NFL Comeback Player of the Year, Burt Bell Player of the Year, and once again a Pro Bowler, and was signed to a 6-year contract extension for $100 million. Less than 2 years from being released from prison, Vick seemed to be a changed man off of the field too, gaining respect of President Barack Obama, who called the Eagles owner to thank him for signing Michael Vick. Even the federal judge, who had harsh words for Vick, complimented him on his changed ways and stated that it showed that the system works. Vick became a spokesperson for the National Humane Society, complete with PSAs and school visits where he spoke on animal abuse. However, Vick's age would soon catch up with him, and in 2012, he would lose his job to Nick Foles, became a backup, and would finish his career in short stints with the Jets and Steelers. In 2017, Michael Vick would announce his retirement after 13 seasons and completed his career with the most rushing yards of any NFL quarterback, 6,109 yards. Andy Reid once again reached his hand out to Vick as he served as a coaching intern under him at the Kansas City Chiefs in 2017. During that time, Vick also became a television analyst. Vick lobbied for the passage of a bill that made being a spectator at a dogfight illegal and lobbied for a bill to protect dogs in hot cars. Of the 47 dogs that went to rehabilitation from Bad News Kennels, all but 6 were eventually adopted, and as of last year, 11 were still alive, enjoying life as man's best friend. The 6 that were not adopted still live at the sanctuary in Utah. As for Bad News Kennels, in 2011, the nonprofit organization Dogs Deserve Better, an anti-tethering group, purchased the property. The organization specializes in working with dogs who have lived their lives on the end of a chain, and a sign out front reads, "Good News Rehab Center." In 2016, the group planted 51 trees in a field beside the house to represent the 51 dogs that made it out alive. However, there are still many individuals who haven't forgiven Michael Vick. When Vick was named a 2020 Pro Bowl coach, over 750,000 people signed an online petition calling for his removal of that position. However, Roger Goodell said of Vick in a press conference via CNN,
"We, over the last, 9 years or so, have supported Michael in his, his recognition of the mistake that he made. He's paid a heavy price for that. He has been accountable for it. He's worked aggressively with the Humane Society and other institutions to deal with animal rights and to make sure people don't make the same mistake he made. And I admire that."
So what about you guys? Do you forgive Michael Vick for the mistakes he's made throughout his career? I personally think it's remarkable to see a player evolve and change for the better right before our very eyes. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more Dark Stories content, let me know in the comment section down below what other stories you'd like us to cover. Aside from that, make sure you check out our additional Dark Stories and player bios in the end screen in front of you. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.